The name of our topic is Land, Soil, Water, Natural Vegetation and Wildlife Resources. So as the name of the chapter suggests, in this video we are going to learn about the following topics. First, land as a resource. Second, the land use pattern. Third, concern regarding the land use pattern. Fourth, about the landslides. Fifth, the mitigation mechanism for landslides. Sixth, soil as a resource. Seventh, the factors of soil formation. Eighth, degradation of soil and conservation measures. Ninth, water as a resource. 10th, freshwater use pattern and the problems of water availability. 11th, the conservation of the water resources. 12th, the natural vegetation and wildlife. 13, the distribution of natural vegetation. And lastly, that is the 14th point, we will be talking about the conservation of natural vegetation and wildlife. So, this is a pretty lengthy topic and let us just start. So, the first topic that we are talking about is land as a resource. So, land is among the most important natural resources. It covers only about 30% of the total area of the Earth's surface, and all parts of this small percentage are not habitable. 90% of the world population occupies only 30% of the land area. The remaining 70% of the land is either sparsely populated or they are uninhabited. The uneven distribution of population in different parts of the world is mainly due to varied characteristics of land and climate, normally sparsely populated or uninhabited. For example, the rugged topography, steep slopes of the mountains, low-lying areas susceptible to water logging, desert areas, thick forested areas. However, in case of plains and river valleys, they offer suitable land for agriculture, and hence these are densely populated areas of the world. So after talking about the land as a resource, let us talk about the use of land, or we can say the land use pattern. Land is used for different purposes such as agriculture, forestry, mining, building houses and roads, setting up of industries. So this is commonly termed as the land use. The use of land is determined by physical factors such as topography, soil, climate, minerals, and the availability of water. Human factors such as the population and technology are also important determinants of land use pattern. The land can also be classified on the basis of ownership, that is, private land and the community land. Now, what are these two types of land? The private land is owned by the individuals, whereas the community land, as the name suggests, is owned by the community for common uses like the collection of fodder, fruits, nuts, or the medicinal herbs. These community lands are also called common property resources. So this was all about the land use pattern. Now let us talk about the concern regarding this land use pattern. So firstly, people and their demands are ever growing, but the availability of land is limited. People started encroaching the common lands to build up commercial areas, housing complexes in the urban areas, and to expand the agricultural land or the land under productivity in the rural areas. Therefore, land degradation, landslides, soil erosion, desertification are major threats to the environment because of the expansion of agricultural and construction activities. Hence, the growing population and their ever-growing demand has led to a large-scale destruction of forest cover and the arable land, and this has created a fear of losing this natural resource. Therefore, the present rate of degradation of land must be checked. Some of the common methods used to conserve the land resources: afforestation, land reclamation, regulated use of chemical pesticide and fertilizers, and the checks on overgrazing. So this was about the concern regarding the land use pattern. Now let us move on to discuss about landslides. So what is a landslide? Landslides are simply defined as the mass movement of rock, debris or earth down a slope. They often take place in conjunction with the earthquakes, floods and volcanoes. A prolonged spell of rainfall can cause heavy landslide that can block the flow of a river for quite some time. The formation of river blocks can cause havoc to the settlements downstream on its bursting. In the hilly terrain, landslides have been a major and widely spread natural disaster that often strike life and property and occupy a position of major concern. So, what are the mitigation mechanisms for landslides? Once we know about the landslide, we should be knowing about the mitigation mechanism. So, some broad mitigation techniques of landslides are as follows. First, the hazard mapping to locate areas that are prone to landslides. Hence, such areas can be avoided for building the settlements. Second, the construction of retention wall to stop land from slipping. Third, increase in the vegetation cover to arrest the landslide. And fourth, the surface drainage control works to control the movement of landslide along with rainwater and spring flows. So these are some of the mitigation mechanisms for landslides. Now, after talking about land as a resource, let us move on to discuss about soil as a resource. So what is a soil? How do we define soil? Soil is basically defined as the thin layer of grainy substance covering the surface of the earth. It is closely linked to land as landforms determine the type of soil. Soil is made up of organic matter, minerals, and weathered rocks found on the earth. This happens through the process of weathering. Weathering can be defined as breaking up and decay of exposed rocks by temperature changes, frost actions, plants, animals, and human activity. The right mix of minerals and the organic matter make the soil more fertile. It takes hundreds of years to make just 1 centimeter of soil. So once we know about the formation of soil, let us know about the factors for soil formation. First, the major factors of soil formation are the nature of the parent rock and the climatic factors. Second, other factors are the topography, role of organic material, and the time taken for the composition of soil formation. Third, all these differ from place to place. The parent rock determines the color, texture, chemical properties, mineral content, and the permeability. However, the climatic temperature, rainfall all influence the rate of weathering and the humus formation. Relief, altitude, and slope determine the accumulation of soil, whereas the flora, fauna, and the microorganism affect the rate of humus formation. Time determines the thickness of soil profile. So these are all the factors that determine the formation of soil. Now let us discuss about how soil is being degraded and what are the conservation measures that are taken for it. So soil erosion and depletion are major threats to soil as a resource. Both human and natural factors can lead to degradation of soils. Factors which lead to soil degradation are deforestation, overgrazing, overuse of chemical fertilizers or pesticides, rainwash, landslides, and floods. So this is about the degradation of soil. Now what are the conservation measures? So some methods for soil conservation are A. Mulching. That is, the bare ground between the plant is covered with a layer of organic matter like straw. This helps to retain the soil moisture. The second step or method is contour barriers. In this, the stones, grass, soil are used to build barriers along the contours. Trenches are made in front of the barriers to collect the water. The third method is rock dam. Rocks are piled up to slow down the flow of water. This prevents gullies and further soil loss. The next method is terrace farming. Broad flat steps or terraces are made on the steep slopes so that flat surfaces are available to grow crops. They reduce surface runoff and soil erosion. The next method for conservation of soil is intercropping. In intercropping, different crops are grown in alternate rows and are sown at different times to protect the soil from rainwash. Another method for conservation of soil is contour plowing. In plowing parallel to the contours of a hill slope to form a natural barrier for water to flow down the slope. And lastly, one more method that can be used for the conservation of soil is shelter belts. In the coastal and dry regions, rows of trees are planted to check the wind movement to protect the soil cover. So this was about the second type of resource, that is the soil. Now let us talk about water as a resource. Water, as we know, is a vital renewable natural resource. 3/4 of the Earth's surface is covered with water. It is therefore appropriately called the water planet. It was in the primitive oceans that life began almost 3.5 billion years back. Even today, the oceans cover 2/3 of the Earth's surface and support a rich variety of plant and animal life. The ocean water is, however, saline and not fit for human consumption. Fresh water accounts for only about 2.7%, and nearly 70% of this occurs as ice sheets and glaciers in Antarctica, Greenland, and the mountain regions. Now, due to their location, they are inaccessible, and only 1% of the fresh water is available and is fit for human use. It is found as groundwater, as surface water in rivers and lakes, and as water vapor in the atmosphere. Hence, fresh water is therefore the most precious substance on the earth. In 1975, the consumption of water for human use was 3,850 cubic kilometer per year. It soared to more than 6,000 cubic kilometer per year in the year 2000. Also, a dripping tap wastes 1200 liters of water in a year. Thus, water can neither be added nor subtracted from the earth. Its total volume remains constant. Its abundance only seems to vary because it is in constant motion, cycling through the oceans, the air, the land, and back again, through the processes of evaporation, precipitation, and runoff. This is therefore referred to as the water cycle. Now, after we know about the fresh water, let us talk about the freshwater use pattern and the problems that are there for the availability of water. Humans use huge amounts of water not only for drinking and washing but also in the process of production. Water for agriculture, industries, generating electricity through reservoirs of dams are other usages. Are major factors leading to the shortages in the supply of fresh water, either due to drying up of water resources or due to water pollution. Increasing population, rising demands for food and cash crops, increasing urbanization, and the rising standards of living. Now, there is scarcity of water in many regions of the world, facing shortages in fresh water supply. Most of Africa, West Asia, South Asia, parts of Western USA, Northwest Mexico, parts of South America, and entire Australia. Countries located in climatic zones most susceptible to droughts face great problems of water scarcity. Thus, water shortage may be a consequence of variation in seasonal or annual precipitation, or the scarcity is caused by overexploitation and the contamination of the water sources. In other words, we can say that the discharge of untreated or the partially treated sewage, agricultural chemicals, and the industrial influence in water bodies are major contaminants. They pollute the water with the nitrates, metals, and the pesticides. Hence, access to clean and adequate water sources is a major problem facing the world today. Amreli city in Saurashtra region with a population of 1.25 lakhs is completely dependent on purchasing water from the nearby talukas. So this was about the use of the fresh water and also about the problems that is related to the availability of water. Now let us talk about the conservation of the water resources. So many steps have to be taken to conserve this dwindling resource, that is the water resource. The water pollution can be controlled by treating these effluents suitably before releasing them in the water bodies. Forest and other vegetation cover slow the surface runoff and replenish the underground water. Water harvesting is another method to save the surface runoff. The canals used for irrigating field should be properly lined to minimize losses by water seepage. Sprinklers effectively irrigate the area by checking the water losses through seepage and evaporation. In dry regions with high rates of evaporation, drip or trickle irrigation is very useful. The valuable water resource can therefore be conserved by adopting these means of irrigation. Now, after discussing about these three resources, namely the land, the soil and the water, now let us discuss about the natural vegetation and wildlife. The natural vegetation and wildlife exist only in the narrow zone of contact between the lithosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere that we call biosphere. In the biosphere, living beings are interrelated and interdependent on each other for their survival. This life supporting system is known as the ecosystem. Vegetation and wildlife are valuable resources. Plants provides us with timber, give shelter to animals, produce oxygen that we breathe, protect soil, so essential for growing the crops, acts as shelter belts, helps in the storage of underground water, gives us fruits, nuts, latex, turpentine oil, gum, medicinal plants and also the paper that is very essential for our studies. Wildlife includes the animals, birds, insects as well as the aquatic life forms. They provide us with milk, meat, hides and wool, whereas insects like the bees provides us with honey, help in the pollination of flowers and have an important role to play as decomposers in the ecosystem. The birds feeds on the insects and acts as decomposers as well. Vultures, due to its ability to feed on dead livestock, is a scavenger and is considered a vital cleanser of the environment. Vultures in the Indian subcontinent were dying of kidney failure shortly after scavenging livestock treated with diclofenac, a painkiller that is similar to aspirin or ibuprofen. So, animals big or small, all are integral to maintaining the balance of the ecosystem. Now, this was in general about the natural vegetation and the wildlife. Now, let us have a look at the distribution of this natural vegetation. The growth of vegetation depends primarily on temperature and moisture. The major vegetation types of the world are grouped as forests, grasslands, scrubs, and tundra. In areas of heavy rainfall, huge trees may thrive. The forests are thus associated with areas having abundant water supply. As the amount of moisture decreases, the size of the trees and their density reduces. Hence, the short stunted trees and grasses that grow in the regions of moderate rainfall form the grasslands of the world. The thorny shrubs and the scrubs grow in the dry areas of low rainfall. In such areas, plants have deep roots and leaves with thorny and waxy surface to reduce the loss of moisture through transpiration. Tundra vegetation of the cold polar regions comprises of mosses and lichens. Now let us discuss about the conservation of the natural vegetation and the wildlife. To feed the growing population, large areas of forests have been cleared to grow crops. Also, the change of the climate has caused the loss of natural habitats for the plants as well as the animals. Many species have therefore become vulnerable or endangered, and some are on the verge of extinction. Are some of the human and natural factors which accelerate the process of extinction of these resources. Deforestation, soil erosion, constructional activities, forest fires, tsunami and landslides. One of the major concerns is the poaching, which results in a sharp decline in the number of a particular species. The animals are poached for the collection and illegal trade of hides, skins, nails, teeth, horns as well as the feathers. Some of these animals are tiger, lion, elephant, deer, black buck, crocodile, rhinoceros, snow leopard, ostrich, and peacock. These can be conserved by increasing awareness. For example, awareness programs like social forestry and Van Mahotsav should be encouraged at the regional and community level. National parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves are also made to protect our natural vegetation as well as the wildlife. The conservation of creeks, lakes, and wetlands is necessary to save the precious resource from depletion. Many countries have passed laws against the trade as well as the killing of birds and animals. In India, killing the lions, tigers, deers, great Indian bustards, and peacocks is considered to be illegal. An international convention, CITES, has been established that lists several species of animals and birds in which trade is prohibited. Conservation of plants and animals is an ethical duty of every citizen. Now, CITES, that is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, is an international agreement between the governments. It aims to ensure that the international trade in specimens of the wild animals and plants does not threaten their survival. Roughly 5,000 species of animals and 28,000 species of plants are protected.